What's up, everyone? If you thought the BTS hype had peaked, 2026 just slapped the universe with a massive reality check. The world is literally shaking right now because all 7 kings have returned, and they aren't just breaking basic charts anymore. They are completely rewriting the global rulebook. From secretive billion-dollar tech takeovers to insane diplomatic flexes that left presidents speechless. What exactly did they pull off? Ready to have your mind blown? Let's dive in. Number 7. RM, the billion-dollar art island redefining global diplomacy. Let's kick things off with the leader himself, the mastermind whose brain is practically classified as a global treasure, Kim Nam-joon, or as the world universally bows down to him now, RM, who absolutely shattered every single preconceived expectation of what a post-military comeback should look like when he executed a move so profoundly massive that it literally had international geopolitical analysts scrambling to understand the completely new world order of 2026. Now, we all know RM has always been an elite art aficionado, the kind of guy who quietly visits obscure museums and single-handedly boosts their foot traffic by 10,000% overnight just by posting a single aesthetic, dimly lit picture on his Instagram. But in the early months of 2026, he took this deep-rooted passion and weaponized it for global good in a way absolutely nobody on this planet saw coming. Instead of just dropping a highly anticipated solo album or doing a standard, predictable luxury brand ambassadorship like every other celebrity fresh out of service, RM completely blindsided the international community by orchestrating the secretive acquisition of a massive, previously abandoned island off the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, outbidding some of the most cutthroat tech billionaires, oil tycoons, and real estate moguls on the planet. And listen to this, he didn't buy it to build some exclusive, walled-off private resort for himself to sip cocktails on. He bought it to establish the Indigo Cultural Sanctuary, a fully autonomous, self-sustaining global hub dedicated entirely to the preservation, exhibition, and protection of indigenous art, literature, and diplomacy that had been displaced or threatened by ongoing global conflicts. Just take a second to let your mind process the sheer, unprecedented scale of this flex. We're talking about a K-pop idol casually stepping into the highly guarded arena of sovereign land ownership, utilizing a brilliant, never-before-seen hybrid model of decentralized funding backed by millions of fiercely loyal armies and heavyweight philanthropic organizations who trust his intellectual vision implicitly. The background to this insane power move actually traces back to his quiet, consistent donations over the years, from restoring delicate traditional Korean artifacts located overseas to funding independent art foundations that nobody had ever heard of. But 2026 was the specific year he clearly decided that simply donating cash wasn't enough anymore. He realized he needed to create an indestructible physical fortress for human culture. When the news finally broke via a beautifully understated press release from Big Hit Music, the internet didn't just break, it completely froze in absolute disbelief, with major financial outlets like Forbes, The Wall Street Journal, and Bloomberg dedicating entire front-page spreads to analyze exactly how a musician managed to negotiate complex international maritime laws and UNESCO cultural heritage treaties better than seasoned, lifelong politicians. He didn't just stop at the legalities either. RM personally oversaw the architectural design of the sanctuary, bringing in master craftsmen to seamlessly fuse traditional Korean Hanok architectural elements, specifically emphasizing deep harmony with the surrounding natural environment, with cutting-edge, futuristic neo-brutalism, creating visually staggering glass-domed galleries that literally look like they were pulled straight out of a beautiful sci-fi utopia. When the official charter of the Indigo Sovereign Foundation was published, the global art market experienced a shockwave so severe that major auction houses like Sotheby's and Christie's literally had to pause their high-profile auctions for an entire day just to deeply assess the sheer economic impact of RM's new non-profit sanctuary, pulling priceless cultural pieces completely off the private billionaire-dominated market. he effectively turned a forgotten piece of rock into a thriving, futuristic beacon of edutainment and peace, powered entirely by next-generation oceanic wave renewable energy that he had secretly co-invested in years prior, proving his dedication to environmental sustainability. The emotional gravity of this move cannot be overstated, guys. Imagine being a struggling, silenced artist from a war-torn country, watching your ancestral heritage being literally erased by bombs, and suddenly receiving a fully funded, lifetime grant from RM's foundation to live, create, and display your life's work in a completely protected international zone where your voice is automatically amplified by the influence of the biggest artist on the globe. He didn't just buy a plot of land, he literally bought a megaphone and an impenetrable shield for the voiceless, flipping the entire conventional concept of celebrity influence completely on its head, and proving once and for all that the soft power of BTS has officially transcended the music industry and entered the serious, high-stakes realm of actual, tangible global governance. Witnesses at the sanctuary's inaugural ribbon-cutting ceremony, which mind-blowingly included stunned UN delegates, UNESCO directors, and some of the greatest living contemporary artists who practically begged for an invite, reported that RM stood there at the podium in a sleek, understated custom suit, delivering a speech so deeply philosophical, raw, and moving about the intersection of art, survival, and pure human connection that left seasoned, hardened diplomats literally wiping away tears in front of the world's cameras. He seamlessly blended his poetic lyrical genius with razor-sharp diplomatic acumen, essentially looking the world's leaders directly in the eye and telling them that while their governments continuously fight over imaginary borders and finite oil resources, true, lasting power lies only in the meticulous preservation of the human soul through art. This sentiment resonated so powerfully across the globe that within a mere 48 hours of the sanctuary's official opening, 3 major warring factions in completely different, highly volatile parts of the world actually agreed to temporary, historically unprecedented ceasefires just to allow their region's most precious cultural artifacts to be safely transported to RM's island for permanent safekeeping. This isn't just a fleeting pop culture moment to be celebrated on Twitter and forgotten a week later. This is a permanent historical milestone that will undoubtedly be studied in sociology, international relations, and political science classes for centuries to come, completely redefining what it means to be an idol, a leader, and a profoundly compassionate human being in the chaotic, divided modern era. The undeniable fact that he managed to keep this entire multi-billion-dollar politically sensitive operation completely under wraps during his rigorous mandatory military service, secretly meeting with cutting-edge architects, heavy-hitting international legal experts, and renowned cultural historians during his brief, rare periods of leave, adds this incredibly thick, undeniable layer of mystery and absolute badassery to his already legendary life-large persona. Fans across the globe were left absolutely hyperventilating, holding their phones with shaking hands, trying desperately to mentally process the fact that while they were busy enthusiastically trending hashtags for his safe return to civilian life, their beloved leader was out there literally playing intense 4D chess with the global economy to build a utopian society for the arts, making every other celebrity philanthropic endeavor look like a cute, inconsequential middle school bake sale in comparison. It makes you sit back, take a really deep breath, and deeply reflect on the true nature of success, doesn't it? How many artists reach the absolute, untouchable pinnacle of worldwide fame and infinite wealth, while Kim Namjoon looked at his immense, terrifying level of power, looked at the fractured, bleeding, deeply divided world around him, and calmly decided to literally build a safe haven from scratch, planting strong, undeniable roots that will easily outlive us all. This is exactly why the world is shaking right now. RM proved with absolute,
terrifying finality that the incredible BTS phenomenon was never just about catchy chart-topping melodies or perfectly synchronized dancing. It was always a brilliantly disguised Trojan horse for a massive, unstoppable movement of positive, earth-shattering global disruption. And by confidently planting his flag on that Mediterranean island, he essentially challenged every single influential figure, politician, and billionaire on the planet to step up their game or immediately step aside. And the absolute craziest, mind-bending part of all of this is that this is just the very beginning of our explosive, jaw-dropping list. If the esteemed leader of BTS is out here casually rewriting international maritime laws and establishing utopian art societies before he even officially drops his next highly anticipated title track, what on earth could the other 7 phenomenal members possibly be doing behind the scenes right now to match this insane, world-altering energy? You better strap in tightly, grab a strong drink, and hold on to your glowing screens for life, because the sheer, unadulterated magnitude of these power moves only gets wildly darker, exponentially more complex, and absolutely more unbelievable from here on out, leaving us all with one burning, undeniable question constantly echoing in our minds. Exactly how far can these 7 extraordinary men push the absolute boundaries of human achievement before the world simply runs out of awards, titles, and historical honors to give them?
Number 6. Jin, the zero-gravity culinary takeover, redefining human sustenance. Moving seamlessly from the profoundly cerebral, world-altering geopolitical genius of our beloved leader, we violently pivot to the eldest Hyung, the undisputed visual king and the man who literally holds the trademark for worldwide handsome, Kim Sek-jin, who in the highly volatile year of 2026 decided to completely obliterate the very fabric of the global food and agricultural industry with a power move so terrifyingly brilliant that it sent massive shockwaves through Wall Street, the United Nations, and even the heavily fortified halls of international space agencies. Now, anyone who has been a dedicated fan of BTS for more than 5 minutes knows absolutely well that Jin's deep, unyielding passion for food is legendary. From his chaotic, deeply entertaining early Eat Jin broadcasting days in tiny hotel rooms to his profound, culturally significant apprenticeship under legendary culinary master Chef Baek Jung-won to meticulously learn the ancient, dying art of traditional Korean liquor brewing, food has always been his ultimate language of love. But absolutely nobody on the face of this planet could have predicted that he would take this wholesome personal hobby and aggressively transform it into a multi-billion-dollar, world-saving biotechnology empire. Immediately following his rigorous, highly decorated military service as an elite assistant drill instructor, where he reportedly witnessed firsthand the immense, undeniable psychological power that a simple, warm, high-quality meal holds over exhausted, broken-down individuals in extreme conditions, Jin secretly began quietly funneling his massive accumulated personal wealth not into flashy supercars or basic real estate, but into highly experimental, cutting-edge vertical farming startups and classified bionutritional laboratories spearheaded by rogue, brilliant ex-scientists from MIT and KIST. The grand, earth-shattering reveal happened during the highly exclusive 2026 Geneva Global Food Security Summit, an incredibly dry, tense political event historically dominated by ruthless corporate agricultural tycoons and stressed international diplomats desperately arguing over shrinking global supply chains and catastrophic climate change, when Jin casually strode into the Grand Assembly Hall looking like a literal deity in a custom-tailored white suit, completely hijacking the keynote presentation to unveil the Epiphany Sustenance Initiative. He didn't just launch a fancy Michelin star restaurant chain for the ultra-rich. Instead, Jin unveiled a fully patented, revolutionary, zero-emission
synthetic bioprotein and agricultural matrix capable of rapidly growing flawlessly authentic, culturally rich Korean ingredients, from the crispest Napa cabbage for kimchi to the deepest, most complex fermented soybeans in utterly barren, soilless environments using a fraction of a single drop of water. The sheer, unadulterated economic impact of this announcement was so violent and instantaneous that the stock prices of three major, historically corrupt global fast food conglomerates absolutely plummeted in a matter of hours, violently losing billions in market cap because Jin immediately announced that the first order of business for his new empire wasn't maximizing corporate profits, but openly providing these highly nutritious, completely climate-proof, beautifully crafted culinary care packages entirely free of charge to active global disaster zones and historically impoverished regions. Imagine the profound, mind-bending emotional whiplash of ruthless Wall Street executives desperately trying to financially short a company that is actively eradicating global hunger while being entirely bankrolled and protected by the most fiercely loyal fandom on the planet, making Jen's corporate entity entirely immune to traditional market manipulation. But because he is Kim Sek-jin, a man whose ambition literally knows no earthly bounds, dominating the terrestrial food supply chain simply wasn't enough for his 2026 masterstroke. He wanted to look up at the stars and completely redefine human limits, leading to the most insane, jaw-dropping flex of a decade when he aggressively lobbied and successfully secured a highly contested, historically unprecedented contract with an international coalition of space agencies to become the sole, exclusive provider of off-planet gastronomy. He partnered with top-tier aerospace engineers to invent a completely new, proprietary form of zero-gravity thermal stabilization, culminating in a historic, globally televised live broadcast from the International Space Station, where a crew of hardened, exhausted astronauts actually broke down into visible tears on live television as they opened Jin's specialized metallic space pouches and tasted the warm, perfectly preserved, fiercely authentic flavors of his traditionally brewed makgeolli and masterfully fermented kimchi jjigae, bringing the profound, comforting, soul-healing warmth of a home-cooked earthly meal to the cold, isolated vacuum of space for the very first time in human history. The global media reaction was absolutely hysterical, completely breaking the internet as major news networks wildly scrambled to broadcast footage of the eldest BTS member casually sitting next to top-tier NASA directors, flashing his trademark, disarmingly charming wink to the flashing cameras while effortlessly explaining the intricate molecular breakdown of his zero-gravity culinary tech, effectively proving that he is not just an untouchable pop icon, but a legitimately terrifying business magnate and humanitarian visionary who single-handedly forced the incredibly stubborn, slow-moving global scientific community to bend completely to his will. The profound, emotional depth of this initiative is what truly leaves people utterly speechless. Jen essentially took the purest, most fundamental human act, the act of feeding someone to show them that they are loved, cared for, and remembered, and scaled it up to a terrifying, planetary, and literally interstellar level, proving that true, lasting global power doesn't come from hoarding resources, but from fundamentally reimagining how we nurture and sustain the human spirit. Whether you are a displaced refugee on Earth or an astronaut floating hundreds of miles above the atmosphere, he weaponized his worldwide handsome charm, his undeniable musical legacy, and his fierce, protective nature to completely hijack the global food industry, turning something as simple as a dinner table into an unstoppable vehicle for worldwide healing, technological revolution, and absolute, undeniable dominance. The sheer scale of what he accomplished in mere months makes you sit back, stare blankly at the wall, and ask yourself entirely new, challenging questions about the very nature of celebrity influence in the modern age. If the eldest member of BTS can casually eradicate supply chain crises, crash corrupt agricultural stocks, and literally make astronauts cry with a bowl of soup, what utterly unimaginable, reality-bending strategies are currently being deployed by the remaining 5 members? Are we even remotely prepared for the psychological and cultural impact of what comes next? If Jin conquered the very essence of human survival and pushed it into the stars, what specific, heavily guarded global industry is currently sitting directly in the crosshairs of member number 5, completely unaware that their entire world is about to be irreversibly turned upside down?
Number 5. Suga, the decentralized music rebellion, bankrupting predatory labels. Stepping immediately out of the interstellar culinary triumphs of the eldest, we dive straight into the gritty, unapologetic, and fiercely brilliant mind of the group's resident producing genius, the man who built his entire legendary legacy on raw authenticity, brutal honesty, and absolute, unyielding defiance. Min Yoongi, globally feared and respected as Suga, and his razor-sharp, untouchable alter ego, August D, who in the earth-shattering year of 2026 decided that simply dominating the Billboard Hot 100 as a soloist was child's play, choosing instead to literally incinerate the entire traditional, highly exploitative global music industry from the inside out, with a move so ruthless and calculated that it sent massive, uncontrollable shockwaves through Wall Street. To truly, deeply grasp the unfathomable magnitude of what Yoongi accomplished, we have to look back at his deeply painful, famously documented origins as a starving, struggling underground beatmaker in Daegu, a young, desperate kid who would literally sell his meticulously crafted, brilliant tracks for absolute pennies just to buy a basic bowl of noodles, constantly getting scammed by shady, opportunistic producers, and helplessly watching brilliant, insanely talented peers get chewed up and violently spat out by a ruthless corporate machine that treated raw human emotion like a cheap, easily disposable commodity. Following his quiet, highly dignified discharge from his alternative military service, while the entire world eagerly anticipated a standard, highly lucrative new solo world tour, or maybe a few high-profile producing credits for massive Western pop stars, Yoongi went completely, terrifyingly off the grid, locking himself deep inside his legendary, highly fortified genius lab in Seoul. But he wasn't just making chart-topping beats this time. He was secretly, methodically collaborating with a shadowy, highly elite network of heavily marginalized rogue software developers, cryptographers, and hardcore, fiercely aggressive music rights attorneys to engineer what terrified international financial analysts are now breathlessly calling the day tweets of protocol. This wasn't just another shiny, basic streaming app designed to mildly compete with the current massive tech monopolies. It was a completely decentralized, utterly unhackable, brilliantly AI-resistant global music distribution and licensing matrix, completely designed with one singular, ruthless, and unyielding objective: to permanently, completely eradicate the predatory middlemen, the greedy suit-wearing executives, and the deeply unfair, legally binding 360 deals that have systematically and financially enslaved recording artists for well over a century. When Yoongi finally pushed the proverbial red button in the sweltering summer of 2026, launching this revolutionary platform globally without accepting a single dirty cent of corporate venture capital or outside corporate interference, the sheer, unadulterated panic that instantaneously erupted in the lavish executive boardrooms of major record labels in Los Angeles, London, and Tokyo was so thick and palpable you could practically taste the fear in the air, because the day tweet protocol fundamentally guaranteed that exactly 100% of all global royalties, streaming revenue, and merchandise profits flowed instantly, transparently, and directly into the pockets of the actual creators, utilizing a flawlessly transparent, mathematically perfect smart contract system that completely, utterly bypassed traditional banking fees and massive label cuts. But because he is Min Yoongi, a deeply complex man whose profound, quiet empathy is just as massive and undeniable as his legendary savage streak, he absolutely didn't stop at just fixing the broken financial infrastructure of the music world. He aggressively, brilliantly weaponized the platform's initial, mind-bending, multi-billion-dollar valuation to simultaneously establish the Shadow and Light Foundation, a heavily funded, completely free, highly confidential and globally accessible network of top-tier mental health clinics, legal defense funds, and psychological sanctuaries specifically built from the ground up for struggling artists, overworked trainees, and desperate creatives who are currently breaking down under the crushing, incredibly toxic pressure of the modern entertainment industry. Imagine the absolute, undeniable poetic justice and the profound emotional weight of a man who once bravely and openly rapped about his own debilitating, terrifying battles with deep depression, severe social anxiety, and the crushing, suffocating weight of global fame on legendary raw tracks like The Last and Amygdala, now casually sitting at the absolute, untouchable pinnacle of global socio-economic power, using his immense, hard-earned fortune to single-handedly violently dismantle the very systemic, institutional abuse that almost destroyed him and thousands of others, effectively looking the greedy, historically corrupt executives dead in the eye and coldly telling them that their century-long reign of terror on young, vulnerable dreamers is officially, permanently over. The global reaction was absolutely nothing short of a massive, unstoppable, fiery cultural revolution. Within exactly 48 hours of Yoongi's meticulously calculated, flawless launch, over 2 million independent artists worldwide, including several completely shocked, massive A-list Western pop icons, who immediately and aggressively legally invoked obscure early termination clauses to aggressively break their oppressive lifelong label contracts, migrated their entire massive discographies directly to Yoongi's new platform, causing the inflated stock prices of the world's top 3 major record conglomerates to absolutely crater and burn in the most violent, unprecedented market crash the entire global entertainment sector has ever witnessed in all of recorded human history. Major international news networks like CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera completely abandoned their regular scheduled geopolitical programming to broadcast live, frantic, deeply confused analyses of how a single, quiet Korean rap producer managed to completely bankrupt a century-old trillion-dollar institutional monopoly literally overnight, featuring deeply emotional, tear-filled, highly viral interviews with veteran, legendary artists who openly confessed on live television that for the very first time in their exhaustive 30-year careers, they were finally able to pay off their families' mortgages and comfortably feed their children purely from the fair, instantaneous royalties generated by Yoongi's brilliant, revolutionary system. The true, terrifying, absolute brilliance of this historical move lies deeply in the undisputed fact that it is completely, legally, and technologically untouchable, because the platform is entirely decentralized and physically, legally owned by the massive collective of artists themselves. Absolutely no government entity, deeply corrupt politician, or incredibly angry, vindictive tech billionaire can ever buy it out, shut its servers down, or maliciously manipulate its core algorithms to favor the wealthy, making Yoongi the undisputed visionary architect of the most liberating, purely democratic, and inherently fair creative ecosystem the modern world has ever seen. Witnesses who were incredibly lucky enough to be present at the underground, highly secretive, no cameras allowed launch party in a hidden warehouse in Seoul reported that Yoongi didn't give a grand, dramatic, tear-filled speech or aggressively pop excessively expensive champagne to celebrate his victory. He simply sat quietly in the dark corner of the room, wearing a simple, comfortable black hoodie, silently sipping a glass of whiskey, watching the real-time global streaming numbers and
and massive royalty payouts frantically flood the giant digital screens illuminating the room, a calm, deeply satisfied, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips as he peacefully watched the corrupt, abusive empires of the old world violently burn to ashes, permanently replaced by a beautiful, thriving system built purely on mutual respect, financial equity, and the raw, undeniable, world-shifting power of music. It forces you to sit back, stare blankly at your screen, and completely reevaluate absolutely everything you thought you knew about the dark intersection of art, extreme capitalism, and human resilience, making you deeply wonder exactly how many brilliant, generation-defining voices were tragically unfairly silenced over the past several decades simply because they couldn't afford to financially survive the industry's disgusting greed, and how one single man's relentless, burning, unquenchable desire for true justice has now absolutely guaranteed that no young, passionate kid making beats in a cramped, freezing bedroom will ever have to painfully choose between their pure art and their basic survival ever again. This is exactly why the entire world is absolutely losing its collective mind right now. Suga didn't just casually drop a highly anticipated, chart-topping album to break a few Spotify records. He forcefully dropped a literal economic nuclear bomb on the most historically exploitive industry on planet Earth, permanently freeing millions of artists from modern financial slavery and forever cementing his towering legacy, not just as a music genius, but as a legendary, unstoppable, historically significant liberator of the creative human soul. And as the chaotic dust finally begins to settle on this completely unprecedented, multi-billion-dollar industry takeover, leaving absolutely terrified, once powerful executives completely jobless, and thousands of globally recognized artists weeping with profound, life-changing gratitude, it intensely begs an incredibly urgent, electrifying.
Number 4, J-Hope, the kinetic neural revolution eradicating global depression. Immediately following the earth-shattering financial liberations spearheaded by Suga, the world's attention was violently and dramatically yanked toward the group's indisputable dance captain, the golden beacon of relentless optimism and the literal embodiment of pure, unadulterated sunshine, Jungkook, universally adored and feared as J-Hope, who in the phenomenally chaotic year of 2026 executed a mastermind power move so completely unprecedented and scientifically staggering that it literally had the World Health Organization, the highest echelons of global neuroscience, and multi-trillion-dollar pharmaceutical monopolies sweating bullets and frantically rewriting their medical textbooks. Now, to truly comprehend the sheer, mind-bending gravity of what Hobie achieved, we must first deeply reflect on his legendary, deeply ingrained roots as a fierce, battle-hardened underground street dancer in Gwangju, a young, hungry prodigy operating under the moniker Smile Hoya with the legendary crew Neuron, where he intrinsically learned long before the fame, the stadiums, and the billions of dollars that rhythmic, raw, physical movement was never just about looking cool. It was a deeply profound, ancient mechanism for human survival, emotional release, and spiritual salvation. Following his incredibly grueling, highly disciplined military service as a top-tier Special Forces training instructor, where he reportedly witnessed the devastating silent epidemic of severe PTSD, crushing clinical depression, and paralyzing anxiety absolutely ravaging the minds of young, brave soldiers returning from unimaginable horrors, J-Hope completely vanished from the public eye for 8 agonizing months, aggressively turning down astronomical, record-breaking offers for solo stadium world tours and luxury fashion campaigns to secretly lock himself inside highly classified, state-of-the-art neurological research facilities alongside the most brilliant, rogue, and avant-garde neuroscientists from Harvard, Stanford, and Johns Hopkins University.
The entire globe was violently shaken to its absolute core during the highly prestigious, notoriously stiff 2026 International Summit on Psychiatric Medicine in Geneva, when J-Hope casually bypassed the heavy security, strolling onto the main stage not in a traditional, suffocating designer tuxedo, but in flawlessly tailored high-end streetwear, completely hijacking the keynote address to unveil the Hope Somatic Neuromatrix, a completely revolutionary, scientifically infallible, multi-billion-dollar kinetic therapy initiative that forcefully merged the raw, visceral freestyle elements of underground hip-hop dance with cutting-edge, patented biorhythmic neuroplasticity treatments. He didn't just open a chain of fancy, elite dance studios for rich kids. J-Hope single-handedly, aggressively funded and launched a massive, globally interconnected network of highly advanced, immersive kinetic healing sanctuaries in the absolute heart of the world's most deeply traumatized, impoverished, and war-torn cities, utilizing a groundbreaking proprietary somatic sync technology that uses specific, heavy bass frequencies, mathematically calculated rhythmic sequences, and synchronized communal movement to literally, physically rewire the deeply damaged neural pathways of the human brain. The sheer, terrifyingly beautiful medical data he dropped on that stage was so irrefutable and utterly astounding that the heavily inflated stock prices of the world's top 4 major antidepressant pharmaceutical companies violently tanked within a matter of mere hours, because J-Hope essentially proved with aggressive, peer-reviewed clinical backing that his specialized, highly curated physical movement therapy was exponentially more effective at permanently curing treatment-resistant depression, severe trauma, and even early-onset motor degenerative diseases like Parkinson's than any synthetic, heavily addictive chemical pill currently rotting on the market. Imagine the absolute unfathomable panic of ruthless, profit-driven big pharma executives desperately trying to financially sabotage and publicly discredit a medical revolution that is completely free, universally accessible, and fiercely protected by the terrifying, unstoppable global mobilization of army, rendering his massive philanthropic empire completely bulletproof against traditional corporate assassination tactics. But because he is Jungkook, a man whose profound, boundless empathy is matched only by his terrifying, unmatched work ethic, he didn't just fund the research from afar, he personally, meticulously designed the entire global curriculum, training thousands of specialized kinetic facilitators and broadcasting live, highly encrypted, fully immersive, zero-cost therapeutic dance sessions directly to millions of desperately struggling teenagers, isolated elderly individuals, and heavily traumatized refugees trapped in active conflict zones around the world, fundamentally proving that true healing doesn't come from a sterile, terrifying hospital room, but from the raw, undeniably human connection of shared rhythmic joy. The global media absolutely imploded, with major networks like CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera completely scrapping their scheduled broadcasts to air deeply emotional, highly viral, tear-inducing footage of paralyzed, completely non-verbal trauma victims in remote, forgotten corners of the globe, suddenly weeping with pure, unadulterated relief as their bodies instinctively, miraculously responded to the deep, resonant, culturally transcendent bass lines of J-Hope's specially engineered healing tracks, finally finding their lost voices and their shattered humanity through the universal, undeniable language of dance. Witnesses who were incredibly fortunate enough to be present at the flagship sanctuary's breathtaking opening ceremony in Seoul reported that J-Hope didn't deliver a dry, boring medical lecture. He simply stepped into the center of the massive, brilliantly lit, state-of-the-art arena surrounded by thousands of previously deeply depressed, broken individuals who had been completely abandoned by the modern medical system, and as the heavy, thumping beat finally dropped, he led them in a massive, perfectly synchronized, earth-shattering routine of pure, explosive joy, his trademark, blindingly bright, heart-shaped smile radiating an aura of such profound, intense, and overwhelming healing energy that seasoned, cynical medical professionals were literally falling to their knees, weeping openly as they witnessed an actual tangible modern-day miracle unfolding right before their very eyes. It aggressively forces you to sit back, take a deep, trembling breath, and completely reevaluate the very concept of physical art and celebrity influence, making you deeply wonder how many millions of beautiful, desperate human lives were tragically lost to the dark, suffocating abyss of depression simply because society convinced them they were permanently broken, and how one single radiant man's unyielding, burning refusal to let the world surrender to its own sadness has now absolutely guaranteed that no one, no matter how deeply lost or broken they feel, will ever have to fight their darkest demons completely alone ever again. This is exactly why the entire medical and corporate world is absolutely shaking in absolute terror and awe right now. J-Hope didn't just casually break a few TikTok dance records, he forcefully, brilliantly weaponized the very beat of the human heart, permanently dismantling a trillion-dollar predatory pharmaceutical monopoly and forever cementing his towering, untouchable legacy, not just as the greatest performer of our generation, but as a legendary, historical savior of the mind and soul. And as the chaotic, beautiful dust finally begins to settle on this completely unprecedented multi-billion-dollar medical revolution, leaving utterly terrified pharmaceutical executives scrambling for relevancy and millions of newly healed, deeply grateful individuals dancing freely in the streets, it intensely begs an incredibly urgent, electrifying, and deeply terrifying question. If Hoseok casually cured the psychological ailments of the modern world using nothing but rhythm and pure empathy, what highly guarded, historically fortified global institution is about to be absolutely shattered, redefined, and completely brought to its knees by member number 3? Are we, as a fragile global society, genuinely mentally prepared to witness the absolute mind-bending, reality-altering climax of this unprecedented multi-billion-dollar BTS world domination, or is human society simply not ready for the sheer, unadulterated, catastrophic shockwaves that are currently accelerating towards us right now?
Number 3. Jimin, the bioempathic textile revolution, eradicating fast fashion exploitation. Immediately pivoting from the profound psychological healing of the kinetic dance revolution, the global spotlight violently and inevitably swung towards the group's ethereal contemporary muse, the man whose sheer physical grace and paralyzing transcendent beauty have historically brought entire social media platforms and luxury brand servers completely to their knees in a matter of mere seconds. Park Jimin, who in the astonishingly disruptive year of 2026 decided to completely annihilate the deeply exploitative, multi-trillion-dollar global fast fashion industry with a power move so terrifyingly elegant and economically catastrophic that it literally had ruthless billionaire sweatshop tycoons and historically untouchable fashion conglomerates aggressively filing for bankruptcy overnight. To truly intimately understand the unfathomable magnitude and the sheer poetic justice of what Jimin orchestrated, we must deeply reflect on his legendary, awe-inspiring origins as a top-tier contemporary dance prodigy at the Busan High School of Arts. A deeply sensitive, fiercely empathetic artist who fundamentally understands better than anyone alive that the human body is not just a biological machine, but a profoundly sacred, expressive canvas for raw emotion, vulnerability, and spiritual connection. Following his highly commendable, incredibly rigorous military service, where he reportedly witnessed the stark, sobering reality of uniform conformity and the deeply unifying, protective nature of clothing in extreme life-or-death situations, Jimin completely vanished from the highly publicized, incredibly glamorous international fashion circuit, aggressively declining astronomical, record-shattering renewal contracts from historically dominant luxury houses like Dior and Tiffany & Co., choosing instead to secretly plunge his massive accumulated personal fortune into a highly classified, incredibly secretive network of rogue material scientists, bioengineers, and marginalized, severely underpaid generational textile artisans from the deepest, most historically exploited regions of the global South. The entire world was violently,
permanently, irrevocably altered during the highly anticipated, intensely exclusive 2026 Paris Fashion Week, an event historically notorious for its superficiality, ruthless elitism, and deeply hidden supply chain atrocities, when Jimin casually, fearlessly bypassed the traditional runway entirely, completely hijacking the iconic, historic glass pyramid of the Louvre Museum to orchestrate the most breathtaking, emotionally devastating, and technologically impossible art installation the modern world has ever witnessed, forcefully unveiling the Serendipity Loom, a completely revolutionary, ethically infallible multi-billion-dollar sustainable textile empire built entirely on a newly patented, completely biodegradable, bioresponsive superfabric scientifically dubbed Smeraldo silk. He didn't just launch another basic, overpriced celebrity clothing line. Jimin single-handedly, aggressively engineered a deeply empathic living material utilizing advanced, flawless neurometric integration that literally visibly changes its subtle hue, structural temperature, and tactile texture in real time, perfectly synchronizing with the wearer's raw emotional state, heart rate, and internal body chemistry, fundamentally transforming everyday clothing from a dead, toxic, mass-produced environmental hazard into a profoundly beautiful, living extension of the human soul. The sheer, unadulterated economic devastation he unleashed on that historic night was so violent and instantaneous that the publicly traded stock prices of the world's top 5 major, historically abusive fast fashion empires violently crashed, instantly losing tens of billions in market valuation within minutes of the broadcast, because Jimin immediately, coldly announced that the entire open-source patent for this revolutionary material was completely free and accessible to the public, heavily subsidized by his own foundation, absolutely guaranteeing that the toxic, soul-crushing reliance on cheap, abusive sweatshop labor and environmentally catastrophic synthetic microplastics was permanently, undeniably obsolete. Imagine the absolute, unfathomable panic and sheer naked terror of historically corrupt billionaire fast fashion CEOs desperately trying to financially sabotage and publicly discredit a global textile revolution that is not only exponentially cheaper and infinitely more sustainable, but is fiercely, violently protected by the terrifying, unstoppable global mobilization of the army, rendering his massive ethical empire completely, universally bulletproof against traditional dirty corporate espionage and highly aggressive market manipulation tactics. But because he is Park Jimin, a man whose profound angelic empathy is matched only by his terrifying razor-sharp perfectionism and unyielding discipline, he didn't just casually disrupt the global supply chain from a comfortable, distant boardroom. He personally, meticulously oversaw the aggressive buyout and complete structural transformation of dozens of notoriously abusive, highly toxic manufacturing plants across Southeast Asia and South America, aggressively converting them into deeply ethical, beautifully designed artisan sanctuaries where previously exploited, traumatized workers are now legally guaranteed massive, thriving living wages, complete free healthcare, and total democratic ownership over their own brilliant generational craftsmanship, completely returning the profound dignity and sheer unadulterated humanity back to the people who physically clothe the world. The global media reaction was absolutely hysterical, completely breaking the internet as major, highly respected international news networks like Forbes, Vogue, and CNN completely abandoned their regular scheduled programming to desperately broadcast live, deeply emotional, tear-inducing footage of formerly impoverished, utterly broken garment workers in remote, forgotten factories suddenly weeping with pure, unadulterated relief and profound joy as they signed their new, beautifully structured equity contracts, finally finding their stolen voices and their shattered dignity completely restored through the unstoppable, universal, undeniable power of Jimin's fierce, unapologetic compassion. Witnesses who were incredibly fortunate enough to be present at the Louvre's breathtaking, highly secured unveiling reported that Jimin didn't deliver a standard dry corporate presentation. He simply stepped completely barefoot into the center of the massive, brilliantly illuminated, completely transparent glass pyramid, wearing a simple, unadorned flowing garment woven entirely from his revolutionary Smeraldo silk. And as he began to perform a stunning, fiercely emotional, deeply raw contemporary dance piece, the entire global audience gasped, weeping openly as they watched the living fabric react instantly to his profound, artistic sorrow and explosive joy, shifting colors and textures in a mesmerizing, impossible display of raw human connection that left seasoned, cynical fashion critics literally falling to their knees in absolute, undeniable awe. It aggressively, forcefully makes you sit back, stare blankly at your screen, and completely re-evaluate the very concept of beauty, material consumption, and the dark, hidden cost of modern convenience, making you deeply, painfully wonder exactly how many millions of beautiful, desperate human lives were tragically, unfairly crushed under the dark, suffocating weight of the global textile industry, simply because society prioritized cheap, disposable trends over fundamental human rights, and how one single breathtakingly beautiful man's unyielding, burning refusal to let the world continue this vicious, ugly cycle of exploitation has now absolutely guaranteed that no vulnerable, hard-working artisan will ever have to bleed for the sake of global fashion ever again. This is exactly why the entire heavily guarded, notoriously elite corporate fashion world is absolutely shaking in absolute terror and profound reverence right now. Jimin didn't just casually grace another magazine cover or sign another massive brand deal to elevate his own untouchable status. He forcefully, brilliantly weaponized the very concept of human empathy and physical grace, permanently dismantling a trillion-dollar predatory global monopoly and forever cementing his towering, untouchable legacy, not just as the undisputed it-boy of our generation, but as a legendary, historical savior of human dignity and the undeniable pioneer of a beautiful, emotionally connected new world. And as the chaotic, profoundly beautiful dust finally begins to settle on this completely unprecedented, multi-billion-dollar ethical revolution, leaving utterly terrified fast fashion executives aggressively scrambling for basic relevancy, and millions of newly empowered, deeply grateful artisans finally thriving and breathing freely, it intensely, violently begs an incredibly urgent, electrifying, and deeply terrifying question. If Jimin casually eradicated global exploitation and fundamentally rewrote the entire relationship between human emotion and the physical world, what highly guarded, completely untouchable, historically fortified global institution is about to be absolutely shattered, completely redefined, and violently brought to its knees by member number 2? Are we, as a fragile, utterly unprepared global society, genuinely mentally ready to witness the absolute mind-bending
Number 2V, the vaunted analog renaissance, bankrupting the soulless AI media monopoly. Violently tearing our gaze away from the breathtaking, biologically responsive textile revolution of Jimin, we are immediately and irresistibly pulled into the deep, intoxicating, and profoundly nostalgic universe of the group's resident baritone visual god, the man whose sheer, untouchable aura and effortlessly classic aesthetic have always felt like they belong to a completely different, far more romantic era of human history. Kim Tae-young, universally worshipped as V, who in the highly chaotic, technologically dystopian year of 2026 decided to execute a masterstroke of cultural rebellion so intensely beautiful and financially devastating that it literally forced the world's largest multi-trillion-dollar artificial intelligence and streaming conglomerates to their absolute desperate knees. To truly intimately grasp the sheer unprecedented magnitude of what Taeyong orchestrated behind the scenes, we must first deeply reflect on the absolute state of the global entertainment industry in 2026, a dark, suffocating period where major Hollywood studios had completely surrendered to soulless, AI-generated scripts, deep-fake digital actors, and algorithmic, fiercely mathematically optimized music, essentially stripping every single ounce of raw, unpredictable human imperfection from the global media diet and leaving society deeply psychologically starved for actual tangible connection. Following his incredibly intense, highly classified deployment in the elite special duty team, a profoundly rigorous, physically grueling environment where the stark, harsh realities of life and death undoubtedly solidified his deep, unwavering appreciation for the fleeting, incredibly fragile, and profoundly beautiful moments of genuine human existence, Taeyong completely, abruptly vanished from the global celebrity radar, aggressively declining record-breaking multi-million-dollar offers to star in massive CGI-heavy blockbuster franchises, choosing instead to quietly, methodically funnel his immense accumulated personal wealth into a highly secretive, globally coordinated buyout of the world's last remaining, desperately struggling analog film manufacturing plants, vintage camera patent archives, and heavily abandoned historic cinema houses scattered across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. The entire world was violently, irrevocably shaken to its absolute core during the highly prestigious, historically elitist 2026 Cannes Film Festival, an event that had recently devolved into a sterile, soulless showcase for tech bros and virtual reality software developers, when Taeyong casually bypassed the traditional, highly manicured red carpet, strolling up the iconic steps of the Palais des Festivals wearing a flawlessly tailored vintage 1950s bespoke suit, casually holding a perfectly restored Leica film camera to completely hijack the festival's grand finale and globally broadcast the launch of the Vante Analog Sanctuary Matrix. He didn't just announce a cute, nostalgic photography exhibition. Taeyong forcefully, brilliantly unveiled a massive, fully funded, multi-billion-dollar global infrastructure completely dedicated to the absolute preservation, production, and exclusive distribution of 100% human-made, purely analog art, permanently banning any trace of artificial intelligence, CGI, or digital manipulation from his global network of exquisitely restored, highly immersive, purely acoustic cinema houses and jazz clubs. The sheer, unadulterated economic devastation he unleashed on that historic, breathtaking night was so violently instantaneous that the heavily inflated, publicly traded stock prices of the world's top 3 dominant AI-driven streaming platforms absolutely cratered in the most historic, unprecedented market crash Silicon Valley had ever witnessed, because Taeyong immediately announced that the world's most brilliant, highly respected independent directors, legendary practical effects artists, and starving jazz musicians had already secretly signed completely exclusive, incredibly lucrative lifetime distribution deals with the Vante Trust, effectively pulling all true, prestigious human art completely off the sterile, algorithm-driven digital internet and placing it exclusively back into physical, communal, deeply sacred physical spaces. Imagine the absolute, unfathomable panic, the sheer, naked terror of ruthless, algorithm-obsessed tech billionaires desperately trying to financially sabotage a massive global cultural renaissance that is completely, entirely immune to digital hacking, completely decentralized from their toxic servers, and fiercely, violently protected by the terrifying, unstoppable global mobilization of the army, who instantly abandoned their digital streaming subscriptions by the millions to physically line up for blocks outside Taeyong's beautifully restored, velvet-draped theaters just to experience the raw, crackling, wonderfully imperfect magic of
a real 70mm film projection and the deep, soulful vibration of live, unedited acoustic instruments. But because he is Kim Tae-young, a man whose profound old soul and deep cinematic empathy are matched only by his terrifying, razor-sharp visionary genius, he absolutely didn't just casually disrupt the global media monopoly from a distant, comfortable penthouse. He personally, meticulously oversaw the aggressive establishment of the Winter Bear Artisan Grants, a massive, globally accessible, multi-billion-dollar philanthropic fund specifically designed to completely financially support young, passionate, highly vulnerable filmmakers, painters, and classical musicians, actively paying them thriving, unprecedented living wages to simply exist, create, and study the ancient, dying techniques of their crafts without ever having to compromise their pure artistic integrity for the sake of a viral 15-second social media algorithm. The global media reaction was absolutely hysterical, completely breaking the internet as major, highly respected international news networks like the New York Times, BBC, and Le Monde completely abandoned their scheduled, highly depressing geopolitical programming to desperately broadcast live, deeply emotional, tear-inducing footage of massive, weeping crowds inside Tae-young's gorgeous theaters, violently experiencing the profound, long-forgotten catharsis of sitting shoulder to shoulder with thousands of strangers in the dark, collectively breathing in the scent of warm popcorn and pure, unadulterated human storytelling, fundamentally proving that no amount of advanced billion-dollar computer processing power can ever accurately replicate or replace the raw, messy, heartbreakingly beautiful essence of the human soul. Witnesses who were incredibly fortunate enough to be present at the flagship sanctuary's breathtaking unveiling in Paris reported that Tae-young didn't deliver a dry, arrogant corporate victory speech. He simply stepped onto the softly lit wooden stage, picked up a beautiful vintage brass saxophone, and played a deeply haunting, incredibly raw, purely improvised jazz melody that echoed through the cavernous, historically rich hall, his deep, soulful gaze communicating a profound, unspeakable sorrow for the art we almost lost, and an explosive, unyielding joy for the humanity we finally, miraculously reclaimed, leaving seasoned, cynical film critics and hardened tech executives literally falling to their knees, weeping openly in absolute, undeniable awe. It aggressively, forcefully makes you sit back, take a deep, trembling breath, stare blankly at your glowing screen, and completely reevaluate the very concept of technological progress, modern convenience, and the dark, hidden cost of our digital addiction, making you deeply, painfully wonder exactly how many brilliant, generation-defining human stories were tragically, unfairly erased by cold, unfeeling algorithms simply because they weren't optimized for maximum corporate engagement, and how one single breathtakingly beautiful man's unyielding, burning refusal to let the world lose its romantic beating heart has now absolutely guaranteed that the pure, tactile magic of human artistry will violently, beautifully outlive us all. This is exactly why the entire, heavily guarded, notoriously elite tech and entertainment world is absolutely shaking in absolute terror and profound reverence right now. V didn't just casually release a highly anticipated chart-topping jazz album or star in an Oscar-winning film to elevate his own legendary status. He forcefully, brilliantly weaponized the very concept of nostalgia and pure human imperfection, permanently dismantling a trillion-dollar predatory digital monopoly and forever cementing his towering, untouchable legacy, not just as the ultimate visual muse of our generation, but as a legendary, historical savior of human connection and the undeniable pioneer of a beautiful, fiercely analog new world. And as the chaotic, profoundly beautiful dust finally begins to settle on this completely unprecedented multi-billion-dollar cultural revolution, revolution, leaving utterly terrified, previously untouchable Silicon Valley billionaires aggressively scrambling for basic relevancy, and millions of newly awakened, deeply inspired humans finally putting down their phones to look each other in the eye. It intensely, violently begs the ultimate, terrifying, mind-bending final question. If Taeyong casually bankrupted the entire global AI media monopoly and fundamentally resurrected...
Number 1. Jungkook, the golden kinetic apex, bankrupting corrupt global sports. Immediately correcting the timeline because we are officially at the absolute untouchable climax of this historical countdown, the precise moment the entire universe has been holding its breath for, violently shifting our focus to the youngest, the undisputed prodigy, the absolute physical anomaly and global pop titan, Jungkook, who in the earth-shattering year of 2026 decided that simply dominating the Billboard charts and selling out international stadiums was utterly, fundamentally insufficient for his relentless, burning ambition, choosing instead to completely annihilate the historically corrupt, multi-billion-dollar international sports committees and global energy monopolies with a power move so terrifyingly massive that it literally rewrote the evolutionary trajectory of the human race forever. To truly, intimately comprehend the unfathomable God-tier magnitude of what Jungkook accomplished, we must deeply analyze his legendary, deeply ingrained obsession with absolute physical perfection, extreme sports, cutting-edge digital gaming, and his fiercely independent directorial vision through Golden Closet films, making him a man who has historically, effortlessly mastered every single discipline he has ever dared to touch. Following his incredibly secretive, highly decorated deployment in the most elite, physically devastating tiers of the military special operations forces, a deeply isolating, intensely grueling environment where he reportedly shattered every single existing physical fitness record in the base's entire history and witnessed firsthand the stark, depressing reality of a modern global youth completely paralyzed by digital stagnation and heavily gate-kept, deeply elitist athletic institutions. Jungkook completely, abruptly vanished from the public eye, aggressively turning down historic, multi-billion-dollar endorsement contracts from the world's largest traditional athletic brands, choosing instead to secretly, methodically funnel his astronomical accumulated wealth and absolute global influence into a highly classified collaboration with rogue aerospace engineers, top-tier kinetic energy scientists, and visionary augmented reality developers from Silicon Valley to Tokyo. The entire planet was violently, permanently shaken to its absolute core during the highly anticipated, notoriously corrupt 2026 Global Athletics Summit in Geneva, an event historically plagued by massive bribery scandals, political manipulation, and elitist gatekeeping, when Jungkook casually, fearlessly dropped out of a literal hovering silent electric helicopter directly above the summit's open-air stadium, landing flawlessly in a custom, highly advanced, sleek black kinetic absorption suit, completely hijacking the global broadcast to unveil the Golden Apex Kinetic Matrix. He absolutely didn't just launch a fancy new global extreme sports tournament or another basic fitness app. Jungkook forcefully, brilliantly unveiled a completely revolutionary, ethically infallible, multi-trillion-dollar hybrid physical-digital infrastructure completely dedicated to simultaneously eradicating global physical stagnation and aggressively solving the world's catastrophic clean energy crisis, utilizing a newly patented, profoundly brilliant biomechanical wearable technology scientifically dubbed the Euphoria Weave, which literally captures the raw, intense kinetic energy generated by intense human movement, rapid heartbeats, and muscular friction, and instantaneously converts it into clean, entirely free, decentralized electricity for local struggling communities.
The sheer, unadulterated economic and political devastation he unleashed on that historic, mind-bending day was so violently instantaneous that the publicly traded stock prices of the world's top fossil fuel conglomerates and historically abusive, deeply bureaucratic international sporting bodies absolutely cratered in the most historic, unprecedented global market crash ever recorded in human history, because Jungkook immediately, coldly announced that this new hyper-immersive AR-integrated global tournament was completely, undeniably free to enter for any single human being on planet Earth, completely bypassing the toxic, incredibly expensive Olympic-style qualification systems and shady scouting networks that have historically crushed the dreams of impoverished, highly talented athletes for well over a century. Imagine the absolute, unfathomable panic, the sheer, naked terror of ruthless, profit-driven energy tycoons and corrupt, suit-wearing sporting officials desperately trying to financially sabotage and publicly discredit a massive global physical renaissance that is completely, entirely immune to their dirty bribes, entirely decentralized from their vulnerable power grids, and fiercely, violently protected by the terrifying, unstoppable global mobilization of the army, who instantly abandoned their incredibly expensive traditional gym memberships and isolating virtual reality headsets by the hundreds of millions to physically step outside, strapping on Jungkook's affordable, brilliant kinetic gear and successfully transforming massive city streets, abandoned parking lots, and remote, deeply rural villages into thriving, glowing hubs of extreme physical competition that literally, measurably powered their own city's electrical grids through pure human joy and sweat. But because he is Jungkook, a man whose profound, relentless drive is matched only by his terrifying, razor-sharp empathy for the underdog and his deep love for his members, he absolutely didn't just casually disrupt the global power dynamic from a distant, comfortable billionaire's throne. He personally, meticulously oversaw the aggressive construction of massive, state-of-the-art Golden Nexus training sanctuaries in the most historically impoverished, deeply neglected regions of the global south, actively paying young, passionate, highly vulnerable kids thriving, unprecedented, completely life-changing stipends simply to train, compete, and generate life-saving electricity for their own local hospitals, orphanages, and schools, completely returning the profound dignity, sheer physical euphoria, and absolute undeniable power back to the actual people who need it the most. The global media reaction was absolutely hysterical, completely breaking the internet as major, highly respected international news networks like Al Jazeera, Reuters, and the BBC completely abandoned their scheduled, highly depressing geopolitical programming to desperately broadcast live, deeply emotional, tear-inducing footage of formerly impoverished, utterly marginalized teenagers in remote, forgotten slums suddenly weeping with pure, unadulterated pride and fierce determination as their explosive, lightning-fast athletic movements in Jungkook's beautifully designed virtual arenas physically turned the glowing lights on in their entire neighborhood, fundamentally and scientifically proving that the raw, undeniable kinetic power of the human body could literally save a bleeding, dying planet. Witnesses who were incredibly fortunate enough to be physically present at the Matrix's breathtaking, highly secured inaugural World Championship in a massive custom-built stadium in Seoul reported that Jungkook didn't sit in an exclusive glass-enclosed VIP box like a traditional, arrogant corporate CEO. He simply stepped onto the massive, glowing, hyper-advanced arena floor, his eyes burning with an intense, unyielding, fiercely competitive fire and personally competed against the world's absolute newest, hungriest, previously unknown athletes in a jaw-dropping, physically impossible display of blinding speed, terrifying strength, and graceful agility that left seasoned, cynical sports analysts, legendary Olympians, and hardened tech billionaires literally falling to their knees, weeping openly in absolute undeniable awe at the sheer, godlike pinnacle of human potential manifesting right before their very eyes. It aggressively, forcefully makes you sit back in your chair, take a deep, trembling breath, stare blankly at your own two hands, and completely reevaluate the very fundamental concept of physical existence, corporate greed, and the deeply dark, hidden cost of our modern, overly comfortable, entirely sedentary lifestyle, making you deeply, painfully wonder exactly how many brilliant, generation-defining athletes were tragically, unfairly crushed and forgotten by corrupt gatekeeping institutions simply because they couldn't afford a basic pair of running shoes, and how one single, breathtakingly powerful man's unyielding, burning refusal to let the human race slowly, quietly wither away into digital nothingness has now absolutely guaranteed that our sheer, explosive physical joy will violently, beautifully, and sustainably power the entire globe for centuries. This is exactly why the entire heavily guarded, notoriously elite global power structure is absolutely shaking in absolute terror and profound defeated reverence right now. Jungkook didn't just casually break every single streaming record on Spotify, release another flawless pop anthem, or